Mayor de Blasio is giving an update on the coronavirus pandemic here in the city. Let's go to it now.
This means our livelihoods coming back, businesses, jobs, the life of our city, everything we love, the joy, the energy, everything that makes New York City great. We're really moving along steadily. Every single day it's getting better. Why? Because of vaccines. Because people went out and got vaccinated. That is the difference maker. So, as always, we're going to focus today on vaccination and how it is the foundation of recovery. It's the foundation of everything we need to move past the COVID era. We're going to also focus on public safety. Recovery equals public safety equals recovery, and new efforts to address and improve public safety. We're going to focus also on building our future, improving our infrastructure, getting ready for a New York City ahead that's stronger than ever before. Those are the things that we need as part of our recovery. Let's start with the main event, vaccines. Where we stand, first of all, we've crossed this amazing Rubicon of 10 million vaccination doses. Unbelievable number. Thanks to everyone who made it happen. As of today, 10,037,551 vaccination doses given in the city of New York, and over 5 million New Yorkers who have had at least one dose. Everyone go back, get that second dose as quickly as possible. We know that's what New Yorkers are doing. We want to build on this rapidly, and that's why we announced yesterday the Key to NYC Pass. And this is the future of the fight against COVID. What we're doing here in New York City is already being emulated and will be emulated a lot more in the coming days by cities and counties and states and private companies all over the country, because this is what we need to do. We had a really good voluntary phase with vaccination. We had great incentives. We had extraordinary efforts to reach people at the grassroots and bring in trusted partners. That was the right thing to do, and it worked in many, many ways. But now we have the Delta variant. It's time to take a different strategic approach, and that means the right kind of mandates. And the Key to NYC Pass, to me, is exactly the right kind of mandate. Gives people an opportunity to live life fully, the freedom to live life fully, simply by getting vaccinated. Even the first dose gets you in the game. And again, easy to show proof with a vaccination card, with the NYC app, or the Excelsior Pass. All of them work. We're going to be sketching out all the details, a lot of good questions about how exactly is it going to work. We'll be doing that over the next 2 weeks. Then we start to implement. There'll be a period to educate and prepare our businesses, work with them really constructively to get everyone ready. Then, in the week of September 13th, we start to follow up with inspections and, if necessary, enforcement. But my sense is, and this has certainly been true in our previous experiences with restaurants and bars and entertainment industries, there's been tremendous voluntary effort to match the rules. Hasn't taken a lot of fines. People have been right there with it. We saw this recently with the Broadway community going the extra mile, saying we want to keep our customers and our workers safe. That's what we need to do across the board. And I think the action that New York City took yesterday is going to help us get there. One of the most important questions is about kids. People have been asking, well, if they're under vaccination age, can they go to the restaurants, the movies? Of course. We want families to be together. Smart thing to do, keep masks on your kids, except for when they're eating and drinking, obviously. But if you're going out as a whole family and your kids are not yet vaccination age, of course they should come along. We're also looking forward to the point where kids can get vaccinated at a younger age, that 5 to 11 group. That's not too far away. That should be this year in the next couple of months. So that's going to help as well. And of course, there's still going to be opportunity to get takeout while wearing a mask. We're going to talk about all those details. But the bottom line is this has been already a policy that is changing minds, that's helping us move forward in the fight against COVID. A lot of details to come. We're going to be talking to the business community regularly, and we want to be clear about listening to all the input and constantly improving on the policy, but we know it's going to make a difference. Now, as to the fact that this should be picked up all over the country and emulated, what clear support we got yesterday from President Joe Biden. I mean, this is just a few hours after announcing the policy. Joe Biden 100% said yes. Cities and states and counties should do this. It's the right thing to do. And I want to thank President Biden for his support. And I think that's going to be tremendously helpful in convincing a lot of jurisdictions to follow this model, which will keep us all safer. And when we presented the $100 incentive, that also got a lot of pickup from the federal government around the country. We know that's working too. So every piece helps to get more people vaccinated. And that's what we're going to keep doing. And we know the more we do, the more lives are saved, the more we protect our recovery, the more we protect against sliding backwards to those horrible times we went through in 2020. I want to bring forward a voice who has so often spoken about the needs of New Yorkers. He thinks about it through an equity lens, but he also thinks about it from the lens of representing a local community in Brooklyn. And he has been someone always looking for the next strategies to help us fight COVID. And I appreciate his support at this crucial moment. My pleasure to introduce the chairman of the General Welfare Committee in the City Council, Councilmember Steve Levin.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to commend you, Commissioner Choksi, and the entire health team on really being bold here and for making sure that we have a fighting chance to have a just recovery in this city and move past this terrible scourge for our city. You know, the data is showing just how contagious the Delta variant is. There are more cases today in New York City than there were 3 months ago. So we're going in the wrong direction. And that's because of how unbelievably contagious this new variant is and how much more contagious it is than the prior variants. And so the only way that we're going to beat this back is with efforts like the de Blasio administration has been instituting and announcing over the last couple of weeks, and having increased requirements for vaccination, I think, is going to be the thing that gets us out of this phase. And I think that all New Yorkers have a responsibility to themselves, to their families, to their loved ones, and to the broader community to get the vaccination, to get it as quickly as possible, and keep one another safe. So, Mayor, thank you again. I appreciate so much the bold leadership that you and your team have shown in these last few weeks on these efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember. I got to tell you, one of the things you said just rang a bell for me. I've already been hearing, directly and indirectly, from a lot of business owners that appreciate this because they want a safe environment for their employees. They want a safe environment for their customers. They don't want people to have to worry. And yes, these actions are bold, but they're actually going to create a lot of comfort, a lot of sense that people can go about their lives and enjoy things and not be looking over their shoulder. So thank you for your support. Every bit helps as we build momentum for these kind of bold approaches. Thank you very, very much. Now, everyone, vaccination's the key. As I said in the beginning, recovery requires a number of elements. Public safety, making sure people feel safe in their own city, their own neighborhood, their own home. We have to work on this every single day. Last night, I was at National Night Out, the 4-6 precinct in the Bronx. I saw everything good about New York City, everything good about the Bronx. Community members out in force to support the police, to work with the police there to support the community. Members of the Cure Violence Movement, the crisis management system were there. Everyone together focused on making sure that the very, very few people who do violence in this city will be stopped. We are really clear, vast majority of New Yorkers, peaceful, decent people. A small number of people do the violence, and we will not stop until we get every single one of them. I want to be blunt about this. Someone who does violence in communities like the 4-6 precinct in the Bronx They're affronting everyone around them. They're undermining the life of their neighbors and their community. It is not acceptable. It does not define that neighborhood in the Bronx or any other part of this city, and we won't let it. So the folks who do violence will be found. They will be arrested. They will be prosecuted, period. And for so many years, New York City has held the mantle of the safest big city in America. We earned it. We're earning it again right now with the most gun arrests in 25 years, with growing cooperation between police and community, with more and more gang takedowns. You're going to see this before your eyes over the coming weeks. The NYPD is on the march. Communities are on the march to make a difference. The Cure Violence Movement and Crisis Management System is on the march. We are taking back streets, taking back blocks, not accepting what the criminals are trying to do to us. And yeah, we went through a perfect storm. We went through something horrible with COVID. Everything we depended on, everything that was normal in our society was suddenly gone. A lot got unmoored. It created tremendous pain. But literally, hour by hour, that is being turned around rapidly. I was there in the Bronx with District Attorney Darcel Clark, and I want to talk about something that she did yesterday, also in partnership with District Attorney Cy Vance of Manhattan and the NYPD, a major gang takedown. Major gang takedown, finding the violence, finding the people who do the violence, finding the people who pull the triggers and getting them off the streets. 8 gang members indicted on 155 counts, including conspiracy to commit murder. And this gang takedown immediately made the streets of the Bronx safer because, as I said, very few people do the violence. Every time you take down a gang, the reality changes in the community. We're going to do that more and more and more. You're going to see a lot more people taken off the streets who do not belong on the streets, have no right to be on the streets. Multiple illegal guns were seized. High-capacity magazines were seized. This was a difference maker, and more to come. But what we need more, I'm going to keep saying it, I'm very thankful to the state of New York and the Office of Court Administration that we've seen major improvement in prosecution of gun cases and follow-through in the courts on gun cases, thanks to the DAs, thanks to OCA. That's great. That's progress. We're not seeing the court system at full strength. We're not seeing enough follow-through on the other types of offenses. And what criminal justice experts will tell you is if there's not consequences, it creates danger for communities. So we want to see the court system at 100% full strength, dealing with all offenses, making sure there are consequences for everyone. That creates the culture of accountability we need. You go around this city, and lots of venues are full. The stadiums are full. Restaurants are full. There's plenty of places at full strength. We brought our office workers back in May. It's time for the court system to get to full strength. We will do anything and everything to help them get there, but that has to be the mandate. That's the best contribution the state can make to helping us 100% turn the tide, make sure New York City is the safest big city in America. So, expect a lot more gang takedowns, expect a lot more gun arrests, expect a lot of folks who pull the trigger to be taken off the streets. So long as the prosecutors and the judges keep following through, we're going to make this city safer literally every single day. And we'll have a lot more to say on this tomorrow when we go over the latest information in the fight against crime. Commissioner Shea and I will be getting together to discuss that with all of you. All right, now, I talked about the focus on vaccines. I talked about the focus on public safety. All of this is about recovery, and then start looking to our future, because we're going to fight back COVID. We're going to bring our city back, and then we're going to go someplace stronger than we've been before. But that requires investing in our future. That requires addressing infrastructure. Thankfully, we're at a moment in history where we're finally getting the support we need from Washington. For, unfortunately, decades, any discussion of infrastructure started with the notion that Washington wouldn't be there for us. Now, thanks to President Biden, Leader Chuck Schumer, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, we're seeing real movement on infrastructure. It's going to make a huge difference, helping New York City to be physically strong so we can build for the future. Today, we're going to talk about something absolutely crucial. If you're a Brooklynite like me, you know how important it is. But even if you don't come from Brooklyn, the BQE matters to the whole city. We have a very different approach we're announcing today. It is bold, it is different, it is innovative, it is about preparing for the future in a new way. And you're going to hear from our Transportation Commissioner, Hank Gutman, but here's the bottom line. Folks at the Department of Transportation have come up with a variety of new strategies to extend the current life of the BQE cantilever up to 2040 and beyond. So you're going to hear new things we're going to do, very different things we're going to do that are going to allow us to protect that crucial section of the BQE as it is right now. And then a big turn away from the massive trucks that too often have caused problems, not just for the BQE, but for life in the city. A vision of how to move away from truck traffic and move things around New York City a better way, a greener way, a cleaner way, a safer way. 4 points: preserve the current infrastructure with new strategies. Second, do the maintenance regularly to make sure that that safety is preserved. Third, hold the trucking industry accountable. Get these big, oversized trucks out of our lives, starting with the BQE, but more and more we're going to fight them all over the city. Fourth, get out of the truck business as much as possible anyway. Turn to rail. Turn to the water, one of our great possibilities that's minimally used in this city. Look at this, one of the greatest coastal cities on earth. Very little of our freight's going on the water, a lot more could. Go to smaller vehicles, electric vehicles, human-powered vehicles even. A lot of amazing work is being done. It's a very different picture than what you heard before because the world's changing and we're finding new solutions. And I want to introduce our commissioner, who also served on the expert panel when the BQE was under consideration in 2019, 2020. And he came away with the belief that we could do something different. And now he has a chance to put it into action. Transportation Commissioner Hank Gutman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't tell you how delighted I am to be here today. There are a lot of us who, as you've noted, worked for a long time on this issue, and I'm thrilled that we've actually been able to come up with a program, come up with solutions that will allow us to continue using this structure for the next 20 years safely through a combination of reducing the weight on the structure. Part of it is right-sizing the lanes, which will also make the structure safer, enforcing weight limits, including through new tools provided by the state legislature, monitoring the structure to make sure that if there's anything that changes or anything that gives us a cause for concern, we get an early warning of it and we can deal with it in a timely fashion. And at the same time, waterproofing the structure, taking preservation steps to keep it from deteriorating further. All of this, we're told by the experts, will give us another 20 years. The other thing we're doing, following up on the recommendation of our expert panel, is we are going to be starting now, this fall, a broad community outreach program. One of the things we learned is that this highway has impacts all up and down the corridor, not just where the triple cantilever is, and we're going to be engaging all of those communities to come up with a highway future now that we have found a way to buy some time to bridge to that future. A lot of people to thank, and I'll get to that in a moment. But first, I want to double down on something that the mayor referenced, namely reimagining freight, because that's a critical piece of this and a critical piece of how we make this better for the future. Mr. Mayor, just as you've challenged us to re-examine and reimagine how we move people in the city to reduce our dependence on private cars, we need to do exactly the same thing with freight for large diesel trucks. Between e-commerce and the pandemic, our freight demands have continued to grow, and there's no reason to believe that's going to change. But we cannot solve that problem by putting more big diesel trucks on our city streets. They destroy our aging infrastructure, they pollute our air, they contribute to climate change, and they absolutely ruin the quality of life in residential communities where they have no business legally being. The good news is we do have alternatives, including enforcing the existing rules and making sure that truckers who don't follow the law are held accountable. But as you noted, we can increase our use of rail, we can turn back to our rivers, which were our original highways, and use them just as we're now doing for passenger ferries, we can do it for freight ferries, and it goes on and on. And then for the last mile, there is no reason for large, oversized trucks to be making local deliveries. We should create intermodal distribution centers in all 5 boroughs where things can be offloaded into electric carts and small electric vehicles for the last mile delivery. I sat here in May and we made an announcement about some freight plans we had, including initiatives along the lines of the last mile. The EDC has done a comprehensive study of how we can make this transition to the future of the city and reduce our dependence on large trucks. And our sister agencies are all working on similar projects, and we're determined to coordinate with them so that we can come up with a single coordinated answer to the question of how New York City moves from where we are today to that future. And one other piece of good news, the private sector is already doing this. We don't need to experiment. We don't need little pilot programs to see whether these concepts work. The major enterprises whose livelihoods depend upon delivering freight are already doing and advocating and moving in the direction of everything that the mayor outlined and that I've just mentioned. So the point I would leave with before turning to the thank yous is we have a chance right now. The mayor's absolutely right. This is the moment. There is a commitment to infrastructure. By this administration, there is a commitment to infrastructure from our leadership in Washington. This is the moment when we can make that change that will determine the future of the city. And this administration's determined to do it. And if the next administration and the administrations that follow through, the next time we sit down to have a serious conversation about the future of the BQE, we will have more and more attractive options to consider than we've ever had before. That's the goal, that's the mission, and we're determined to make that happen. A few quick thank yous. First, Jeannie Kim, my Chief Strategic Officer, who shepherded all of this through the DOT. There's no way we'd be in a position to make this announcement today without her. Senator Kavanaugh and Assemblymember Simon, who you'll be hearing from in a few minutes, who've been working tirelessly on this issue for years and are responsible for the WIM legislation that lets us use automated enforcement against overweight and oversized trucks, which have plagued us all along. Councilmember Levin, Carlos Azaro, who chaired the expert panel, to Carlo and to my fellow committee members. In what we're doing today, if you recognize elements of your work, that's not an accident. We have built on all the great work and innovative thinking of the committee, so thank you to Carlo and thank you to everybody on the committee. And to all the other elected officials and community members who over the last few years have weighed in on this issue, your government listened. Your government is responding. That's what today is about. And in the months ahead, as we pursue the outreach for the long-range vision, you will see that we continue to vision. So thank you to all of you for your input and for your continued input. And finally, Mr. Mayor, none of this would have been possible without your vision, your commitment, your willingness to plan for and move toward our future. So thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Hank. This is exactly the right kind of direction. And I appreciate your boldness, your whole team's willingness to go someplace different. We got a lot of work to do, but this is the right way forward for the BQE. And look, I want you to hear from some of the folks who made this possible, particularly because we could not be talking about controlling the oversized trucks and all the damage they do, all the problems they cause, if we didn't have a new law in Albany that made it possible to do that the right way. And State Senator Brian Kavanaugh, he is a guy, he's a thinking man. He often has a critique, but he also backs it up with action. And we said, if we're going to do this enforcement, we need help. And he went and got us help. So I'm profoundly appreciative. I want you to hear, representing the community affected right there around that part of the BQE, State Senator Brian Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and Commissioner Gutman. This really is an important moment for the communities we represent and really for all of the New York metropolitan area. We know that we are currently still far too dependent on older ways of managing transportation of goods and people around the metropolitan area, and the BQE, which Robert Moses and others jammed through some residential communities in a very odd way that is difficult for us to deal with today, really is, that method really is still with us and still essential. But I applaud this administration, first of all, a number of years ago for recognizing that the BQE as it is currently configured is not sustainable, that there were growing safety issues, growing issues about the viability of that highway. And the administration came forth with some options a while ago. Some of those were considered very problematic, to say the least, for some of our constituents. But taking that first step and recognizing that this is a problem that needed to be addressed was critical. And now we've come full circle with Commissioner Gutman and the team at DOT coming up with what I think is really an excellent, thorough, thoughtful rethinking of the options here that, as the commissioner said, recognizes two distinct realities. First, it recognizes that our transportation needs are changing dramatically and our transportation options are changing dramatically with new technology, with new ways of people consuming goods, expecting things to be delivered to their doorstep. That has changed patterns and put very serious pressure on our roadways and on our city. First of all, the steps that we're talking about today are intended, will give the city and the state and the federal government the opportunity to address that. Secondly, it'll give the city and the state and the federal government the opportunity to rethink this corridor in a way that really will reflect the aspirations of the people who live along the corridor. This was, as I said, jammed through several communities in prior generations. It is very far from ideal the way it's configured. It cuts communities in half. It lacks green space and other opportunities to sort of integrate the highway better into our communities. What we're talking about today, by extending the period of the useful life of the existing highway, by making sure it's safe during that period for drivers and for others who might be worried about the crumbling infrastructure, we really are taking a big step forward. And I thank the mayor and Carlo and the commissioner and my colleague Joanne Simon and the very relevant today Steve Levin, who is here for two topics, for supporting our approach of making sure we have real enforcement for overweight trucks. That's been a huge problem all over the metropolitan area, indeed all over the country. And I think what we're piloting here in New York will become a national standard for how to enforce overweight truck rules. So again, I thank the mayor, I thank the commissioner, and I thank everybody at DOT who stuck with this plan and is seeing it to fruition today.
Thank you so much, Senator. And now I want to turn to your partner in achieving this really, really important legislation. I want to say I've known Joanne Simon a long time. We were both coming up and involved in the community around the same time, and she was a community activist well before she was an elected official, and she fought for things like safer streets and a cleaner, greener community, and this is the kind of approach that's going to allow us to do those things. So with great thanks for having achieved the legislation in the Assembly, my pleasure to introduce Assemblymember Joanne Simon. There you go. We see you. you muted. Wait, we're not. Can you hear us okay, Joanne? No, you may be muted. You may be muted.
Who's in charge here? Me and
I think it's coming in scratchy. Do you want us to jump ahead and see if we can fix that? Yeah, Joanne, we're gonna jump ahead to Steve, and we'll come right back to you as I turn, making a double bill appearance, twin bill of himself, Steve Levin today. And as I said, I came up with Joanne Simon in community involvement in Brooklyn. I came up with Steve Levin in a different way. We both fought together against the closure of Long Island College Hospital and got arrested in the process and shared a cell together. So I will always refer to him very fondly as my cellmate, council member Steve Levin.
Thank you, Mayor Cellmate. Thank you. I appreciate it. I do want to just once again commend your administration and thank my friend Commissioner Hank Gutman. Also acknowledge the great work that College Lacerda has done with the expert panel. Acknowledge the work that Speaker Corey Johnson and Council Land Use did, and really the broader Brooklyn Heights community which has really come together and said, okay, how do we plan for a transformative intervention here? And the time that this new course will afford the community to really look through how to address the entire corridor of the BQE from Bay Ridge to Astoria is, I think, is going to be essential. And so, you know, I think there are so many ways that we could bring communities together, communities that have, as Brian noted, been divided because of the BQE over the years. I think of South Williamsburg, south side of Williamsburg, where the BQE cuts right through, or Columbia, the Columbia waterfront and Carroll Gardens. And I think that this is absolutely the responsible, long-term way to go. And so I really thank also Hank and his team for having the foresight to say, let's look at this again and again and again, see what new technology is available to get additional useful life out of the current BQE, so that we can really plan for the future generations and have a positive impact on our city. So again, Mayor, I commend you, I thank you, and I really greatly appreciate Hank and all of the work that he's done. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Steve. Really appreciate it. Okay, everyone, let's see if we have the Assembly member back or not. We're going to try the Assembly member Joanne Simon one more time. Let's see if we get this to work. Joanne, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
You are coming through loud and clear. And again, with great thanks for your wonderful efforts on Albany to get this legislation done. Take it away, Joanne.
Thank you, Mayor de Blasio and Commissioner Gutman. I'm truly delighted to join you and my other colleagues in government this morning, Senator Kavanaugh and Councilman Levin, and our expert panel chair, Carla Shasura, for this really important announcement about the future of our city. I also confess to being more than a little bit relieved that we're here as well. So I'm really pleased that we're finally committing and have a plan to fix the BQE triple cantilever that in a way that buys us the time to actively plan for a vastly safer, smarter, and more sustainable corridor for the communities through which the I-278 roadway passes. You know, it's been increasingly scary in terms of deterioration of the roadway, and we haven't had good options for going forward. So, as you know, all things, we're all connected, and the failings of the past, as you know, Senator Kavanaugh mentioned Robert Moses, those decisions along the corridor have given rise to a lot of displacement, cutting off neighborhoods, dividing neighborhoods, and increasing asthma and pulmonary disorders, if nothing else, and really excessively burdening the low-income communities of color along much of the corridor. So it's a great relief that DOT took the concerns of the communities and the elected officials to heart and came up with an approach where the worst sections will get the much-needed repairs and slow corrosion, and really give us the time to envision and build a coherent 21st century approach to the corridor, so we don't repeat those mistakes of the past. And, you know, a critical piece, I thank you, Mayor de Blasio, for mentioning and inviting Senator Kavanaugh and I here today about the weight in motion legislation that we were able to pass. I've been really, really pleased to have the strong support of your office and that of the DOT and Commissioner Gutman to pass that bill so that we can electronically monitor and hold accountable illegally overweight trucks throughout the corridor and keep them off the triple cantilever, which has been causing so much of that deterioration. So I'm looking forward to working together with all of my colleagues at all levels of government and with our local communities to plan for the entire corridor and really address, you know, other things, including tunnel alternatives along the BQE, prioritizing our climate concerns for a just transition. So I want to thank you again, Mayor de Blasio and Commissioner Gutman. Thank the whole DOT team who have given new meaning to the word persistence, to my colleague Councilman Levin, Carlos Chisora, and all of the expert panel members who work so hard to give us the lift we needed for this new planning. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Joanne. Thank you for everything you've done to help make this happen. Now, I want you to hear, everyone, from one more person who really has a lot to say on this because he was the chair of the BQE expert panel. He knows and loves his Brooklyn, and he is president and CEO of the New York Building Congress. And I'm going to help Hank Gutman with Italian pronunciation. Carlo Chisura. Buongiorno.
Buongiorno, buongiorno. I love Hank so much that it's okay, so don't worry. Look, Mayor de Blasio, you could have left this for the next administration, and you didn't. And you took bold leadership now, and we are thrilled about that. Commissioner Hank Gutman, you are the right person in the right role for today, and I hope for tomorrow. I believe that the work that you and all of the panel members did together with me 2 years ago helped lead us to where we are today. And I think that one of the things the panel determined way back when was that we didn't want just shiny pictures of projects that may or may not happen, that we wanted a real community planning process with a consensus for what are the next steps, not just for a mile and a half in Brooklyn Heights, but really for the entire corridor. So we were very excited to hear your recommendations today, Mayor de Blasio and Commissioner Gutman. And I think that the community and all the communities, and it really stretches from Staten Island up to the Bronx and everybody in between, will have a say in the future of a better road, a smaller road, a more climate-resistant road, a greener road, a road that incorporates the greatest building technologies that are out there, and something that we connect people as opposed to dismantling communities. So, Mayor de Blasio, you know I'm a big fan of yours. I think what you're doing today is remarkable, and I think, Commissioner Gutman, you are to be commended because you understand that community and you've taken tough stances in that community, and you've always been a man of honor, of decency and integrity, and I think it shows today. To the elected officials, I remember, Joanne Simon, my first chat with you when I worked for Vinnie Gentile in 1997 at a meeting about burying the Gowanus, and I'm happy to say we are still here today, and I believe that today is really the beginning of the next chapter of this. And you and Senator Kavanaugh also took a great opportunity, created great legislation, and we were proud to support it. And I know with Councilman Levin and with the work that the council did, this really is a win-win for everybody involved. So we're going to continue to roll up our sleeves. I think, you know, Mayor de Blasio, you said it earlier, this is a moment for infrastructure. It's a moment that the Congress, Senate Majority Leader Schumer, President Biden are committed to infrastructure, and we are committed, I believe, as community leaders and elected officials to ensure that when infrastructure dollars come to New York City, that the B2E and the corridor will be, you know, at least in the top 5 of the priorities. So again, Mayor de Blasio, thank you. Commissioner Gutman, thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlo, and thanks for all you did to help us get to this moment. All right, everyone, let's go to what we do every day, our indicators. And again, as I said several times, I'll keep saying it, we're going to continue to modify the indicators in the course of the week. So going into the future, you'll see some different information. But let's go over the format as we have it now. Number 1, daily number of people admitted to New York City hospitals for suspected COVID-19. Today's report is 103 patients. Confirmed positivity level 33.64%. Hospitalization rate 0.79 per 100,000. Number 2, new reported cases on a 7-day average. Today's report 1,301 cases. And number 3, percentage of people testing citywide positive for COVID-19. Today's report on a 7-day rolling average 3.14%. Let's say a few words in Spanish. I'm going back to the topic of public safety. The gang takedown that got announced, and more gang takedowns to come. Todos los neoyorquinos merecen sentirse seguros en sus vecindarios. Los derribos de las pandillas hacen más seguras las calles del Bronx. Si están en una pandilla violenta, tengan cuidado. Vamos a llevarles ante la justicia. With that, we turn to our colleagues in the media, and please let me know the name and outlet of each journalist.
We'll now begin our Q&A. As a reminder, we're joined today by Commissioner Gutman, by Dr. Choksi, by Dr. Katz, and by Department of Transportation Chief Strategy Officer Jimmy Kim. First question today goes to Juliet from 1010 Wins.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Mayor. How are you?
I'm doing well, Juliet. How you doing today?
I'm okay, thank you. So you just mentioned in the indicators the positivity rate 3.14%. You know, that number's been climbing, but there are certain pockets of the city that are much higher. Ozone Park, 8% positivity rate. South Staten Island, nearly 8%. Parts of Brooklyn at 6%. What are you doing to tackle those pockets of the city where that rate is high?
So, Juliet, we got to reach everyone. We got to get more and more people vaccinated all the time. And I want to say this, we believe everything that we're now putting on the table, the $100 incentive, the vaccine mandates for city workers, the key to NYC pass for restaurants, for indoor entertainment, gyms. All of these pieces are going to add up, and they're going to have a particular impact in the places where fewer people are vaccinated. We're going to reach people in a variety of ways. We need to reach them. We need to keep people safe through vaccination. That's the whole ballgame. I also want to say, as we've said, that the positivity level is something we're going to be paying less and less attention to because it is not showing us accurate enough information. We see a lot of changes in the way testing is happening in terms of the number of people and who's going to get tested. What we're focused on is the case numbers, which are way too high, the hospitalization rate, which is actually still pretty good, and the vaccination numbers, which are strong, and we intend to make a lot stronger. So, Juliet, just to give you the update right now, 60% of New York residents have received at least one dose, 5 million plus now and growing. Almost 72% of adults in New York City have received at least one dose. And then we've seen real progress with that youngest group, the 12 to 17-year-olds now. About 250,000 of them have gotten at least one dose. And we're going to be making a big, big push for back to school. So all of those pieces combined are going to get us where we need to go. Go ahead, Juliet.
Okay. Also wanted to ask you, what agency will enforce vaccination mandates? Police Commissioner Shea was on this morning on TV saying he doesn't want, NYPD involved with that. So what agency will do that? How is that going to work?
Yeah, he's right. This is a civilian approach. Department of Health in particular. And we're going to come forward over the next week or two with the specific rules. We're going to give people time to get acclimated to it during August, going into the beginning of September. I believe profoundly, Juliet, that the vast majority, restaurants, bars, movie theaters, gyms, people are going to accept this and act on it for the safety of everyone. And we've seen tremendous cooperation historically. A few outliers get a lot of attention, but if you really look overall, you get a whole lot of cooperation in something like this. In fact, a lot of business owners have told us they welcome it because everyone's going to be safer and everyone's going to know the ground rules. So, civilian enforcement, and we're going to get those details out in the coming days.
The next is Steve Burns from WCBS 880.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Mayor. How are you?
Good, Steve. How you been?
I'm doing all right. I wanted to ask about the BQE plan, looking to get some concrete points, I guess, if you'll excuse the pun.
That was good, Steve. That's a good one. I like that one. That's a quality pun.
Thanks. I figured you'd appreciate it. On the specific repairs that are happening, what are those specific repairs that are happening in the short term? What can drivers expect on that cantilever? And the commissioner mentioned right-sizing lanes. I wanted to see if we could get a specific on what that'll look like, if that's the recommendation from Carlos Asura's panel, reducing it from 6 lanes to 4, what that looks like.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Steve. I'll turn to Commissioner Gutman, and obviously also he credited his Chief Strategy Officer, Jimmy Kim, who's done a lot of work on this. Let them both speak, and I hear you, Steve. Real specific bullet points, starting with how the lanes are going to be handled. Go ahead, Hank.
Sure. We will be following the committee's recommendation and substituting the 3 substandard lanes, which are only 10.5 feet wide, which is an issue, for 2 standard width lanes of 12 feet wide with a 9-foot shoulder. The difference in terms of flow of traffic should only be about 10 or 11%, and there are lots of ways to make up for that. But it will reduce the load on the structure, which is one of the ways we get the extra life and safety out of it. And it's also safer in general because regulation size lanes are safer for the traffic. Having a shoulder means that we can have exit and entrance ramps, and it also allows for fewer delays when there's a minor fender bender or a breakdown on the road. The shoulder gives you some place to move the car so that it doesn't block traffic. So we're quite comfortable with that change. As to the repairs, these are repairs that have been previously announced. There are a number of sections of the road that have been previously identified as being in worse shape than others, and we have a plan beginning the end of this year, beginning of next year, to start repairing those. And when we're doing that, that is going to involve some closures and some delays. We're going to try to do what we can overnight to minimize the delays. But again, if we've got less traffic on the road to begin with, that makes dealing with all of these repairs a lot easier.
Amen. And Jimmy, why don't you speak a little bit about waterproofing the road and some of the other innovations, the impact of the technology, reducing the oversized trucks. Just give us quick bullets on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I think the headline is that we have found a 20-year solution to maintain the health of the structure. And what our experts have revealed is that by reducing or eliminating the salting of the roadway and waterproofing the joints, because salt and water equal corrosion, you are able to create a situation where the structure can be safe and intact for 20 more years. And combined with the reduced load, we are really helping to ensure the safety and viability of the roadway while we come up with a community-based vision.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. Go ahead, Steve. Steve, you there?
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. I wasn't sure if I was still muted. Yeah. Just to follow up, one of the slides there, point 4, was find a long-term vision, and that, I guess, would be left to your successor. I know a lot of the kind of storyline around this has been that we knew about these problems the last 4 or 5 years or so, and it has taken all of this time to find a solution. If that solution finding had started 4 or 5 years ago, we might be able to have a long-term vision now instead of sort of this 20-year fix that necessitates another solution down the road. So I understand the kind of rationale here for the short-term fix, but why couldn't we go longer term sooner than we are right now?
Steve, I hear your question. I respect your question. I think the glass is more half full than half empty, honestly. First of all, 20-year solution, I'm not going to sort of treat as like a short-term thing. That's a major, major deal. When we first engaged this issue, we thought we were dealing with a very tight window. And we tried to come up with solutions, all of which raised community raised valid concerns. There were imperfect realities in the solutions offered, and it caused people to go back to the drawing board, which is often a very healthy thing to do. That led to recognition that maybe we could approach the core immediate problem very differently and buy a lot more time the right way. So I think what's been achieved here is to change the terms of engagement. We're now talking about having the time to do the really big creative stuff. Now, I mentioned what that needs to be. That needs to be getting more and more of our freight in general off the roads, onto rail, onto the water, and then, as Hank said, turning to smaller vehicles that make less negative impact in every way, electric vehicles, even in some cases in neighborhoods, human-powered delivery. You've seen the cargo bikes, which are really actually making a big difference. All of these things need to happen. So we're going to provide publicly a vision of how we pull all these pieces together. Hank said EDC has already, Economic Development Corporation, has already been working on some of these alternative ways of moving freight around, rail, water, et cetera. We're going to be announcing specific plans for the future and making sure they're underway. And then the next administration can take it from there and make their decisions. But in truth, we're going to not only create a much longer time horizon, we're going to be putting into motion the things that will change the future reality of the BQE as well.
The next is Chris from the Daily News.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Chris, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, man.
So, wanted to ask about Governor Cuomo. When I asked you yesterday, outside the governor's office in Midtown, if you believe the governor should be prosecuted, you said you wanted to leave that to prosecutors. However, on CBS this morning, you said that you think he should be prosecuted. So, what changed there?
I got, like everyone, I've been getting more and more information hour by hour. And when I saw you initially there, I hadn't had a chance to see as much of the report as I saw after, or see the press conference with the Attorney General and the investigators. Clearly, there's grounds for prosecution. But the most important thing right now is for the governor to resign and end the agony he's putting the state of New York through, and end the pain that these 11 women are going through, who were wronged in every sense in an unacceptable manner. I want to state again, him trying to put out some video, slick video, to say it's culturally okay to harass and assault women, that's ridiculous, and it was an embarrassment, and it's not okay. It never was okay. It wasn't okay 50 years ago. It wasn't okay 100 years ago. So stop with this attempt to say culturally somehow he's allowed to do what he did. No, it's not acceptable. He needs to resign. Let's get this over with, because the entire state has spoken now. The people have spoken. The leaders have spoken. It's time to go. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. On the BQE plan, there were DOT inspections that were showing that 2 spans of the triple cantilever were falling below safety standards, and that they could be at risk of collapse come 2024 unless immediate repairs were done. Your plan is not paving any way for immediate repair, so are you concerned that the roadway could collapse here, and why are you pushing off those repairs?
Yeah, Hank and Jimmy, let's talk about what you have learned working with the experts you brought in, and why it's a different reality than what was originally projected. Go ahead.
Yeah, I apologize if we haven't made this clear enough. Those items, those areas you're referring to, are the subject of repairs, some of which have already started, the rest of which are going to start later this year. So the immediate problems that were identified are being addressed now. That part is clear. The addition today, as Jimmy said, in the headline, is that we've also found a way to extend the life of the rest of the roadway, the areas that didn't present those kinds of acute problems but were nonetheless of concern, for another 20 years. That's the big news, that's the development, and that's something that we're announcing today and thrilled to announce. But the immediate repairs we're dealing with. The other piece, the other detail, is we have already begun installing and will have operational by the spring a series of high-tech sensors that will measure on an ongoing basis the behavior of the roadway, so that if anything changes, if anything starts acting a little different than it has been, we will get notice of that, and we will have an opportunity to send the engineers right out and take whatever corrective action is necessary, including, if necessary, closing down portions of the road. So we are taking serious steps to address the known problems right now, and to make sure that in the future there aren't surprises. We're doing both of those, and those are part of the plan.
Thank you. Go ahead.
The next is Juan Manuel from New York One.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Hey, Juan Manuel, how you doing?
Very good, thank you. So, Mr. Mayor, how do you reconcile the fact that you're mandating restaurant and gym employees to get vaccinated, but you're not doing the same kind of mandate for public employees like police officers and teachers? You're giving them the option of getting tested every week. They are public servants, they are city employees. Shouldn't they be setting an example for all New Yorkers since they are interacting with New Yorkers every day at their jobs?
Juan Manuel, I appreciate the question, and my answer is the one I've been giving and acting on now over these last few weeks. We are climbing the ladder. Every day we're looking at new options, and we're acting on a number of them. And when we think it's the right time for each option, we move. So the mandate I put forward for first hospital workers, then we expand it to all public employees, get vaccinated or get tested. The goal there was to maximize vaccination. Couldn't have been blunter about it. We want to make vaccination really easy, really appealing. Obviously, $100 incentive on top of that. We want to make people feel they don't want to go through all that testing, just get vaccinated. That's best for everyone. We're going to watch how that goes, and then we're going to decide if we need to take additional action. Each of these situations is different, I truly believe, because with what we're doing with entertainment, indoor dining, those are different matters than public service. But I assure you, we're going to look at any and all options and make decisions over the next few weeks of what's going to help us get more and more people vaccinated. Go ahead, Juan Manuel.
Mr. Mayor, you might be working with a different governor in Albany in the last couple of months of your tenure as mayor of the city. What kind of relationship do you think you would have with a possible Governor Hochul, and when was the last time you spoke to her?
I saw the lieutenant governor at an event, a month or so ago. We just chatted very briefly. I've gotten to know her over the last few years. She strikes me as a very reasonable person. I believe, what we've experienced with Andrew Cuomo is wildly aberrant. It's not how normal people act. I've had an ongoing relationship with a lot of elected officials. Look at one of the most important, one of the most powerful people in the United States of America, Chuck Schumer. Our own Chuck Schumer acts entirely differently than anything you've seen with Cuomo. Right next door, Governor Phil Murphy, New Jersey, entirely differently. People who know how to treat people respectfully, how to listen, how to work together, would never think of doing some of these horrible things that have been outlined here. I believe that if Kathy Hochul becomes governor, she'll be an honest broker. We'll be able to work together and get to work addressing issues that we need to address. Right now we should be focused on fighting COVID and bringing back this city and state. And instead we're having to talk about things like sexual harassment and assault. It makes no sense. If Kathy Hochul's in office, I'm quite sure we can work together.
The next is Henry from Bloomberg.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. How are you doing today?
Good, Henry. How you been?
Good, good, good. I wanted to stay on the subject of what the future portends for not really Governor Cuomo so much as the Democratic Party, of which you are one of the state's leaders. Where do you see the future of the Democratic Party going after this whole episode plays out, its impact on the politics of the state?
Well, that's a big, interesting and powerful question, Henry, and I can only give you a little bit because it's such a big topic. What I'd say is, in this state, the Democratic Party has been moving consistently in a more progressive direction. We left behind the days in which, long ago, we left behind the days in which Governor Cuomo conspired with the IDC to create a kind of Republican light version of government. The party has increasingly shown That's part of the past, and where we're going is a direction that focuses on working people. And I think it's going to be a lot healthier for the Democratic Party and a lot broader coalition ultimately. So I think the reset was happening long before these scandals, but I think it will be amplified because the governor won't be here much longer. Go ahead, Henry.
Okay, thank you for that. In the same vein, very recently, the candidate for mayor, the Democrats' candidate for mayor, Eric Adams, has been talking about Congresswoman Cortez and other members of kind of the most progressive wing of the party in the most disparaging terms, and really kind of separating himself from them and criticizing them pretty vigorously. And I'm just wondering whether you think that this is a productive way for him to be proceeding politically, or whether it creates problems for the party going forward.
Look, I have not seen those comments you refer to. I don't want to try and analyze things I really haven't seen. I respect Eric Adams a lot. Everyone knows that. I very happily and warmly endorsed him this week. I want to tell you, having worked with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I think she's doing great work. I think the model we're seeing in Washington of different parts of our congressional delegation working in unison. Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand have different views than Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and she has different views than some other members in the House delegation, but everyone is working together with a lot of respect. When there's a philosophical difference, people will put it out there, but they still manage to find unity on many, many levels. And I think what progressives have found for President Joe Biden is, a listening ear and an open hand, and that there's been a lot of common ground. I think the progressive movement helped create a dynamic where the president could act in a more progressive fashion. I also think that was a lot of what he felt instinctively. So when I look at it, I see a party that actually overwhelmingly agrees on most things. And I think that's true here in the state as well, and I think that's what the future is going to show.
The next is Kevin from AM New York.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, how you doing?
Good, Kevin. How you been?
Good. You know that this is a topic I've asked a lot about, so I'm glad to get some updates on it today.
Yes, Kevin, you have been a picture of persistence, brother.
I try. And I guess to start out, I'd like a bit more concrete details on the plans. When does the city plan to install these weigh motion sensors, or when are they activated, and like for how much of the highway? And can you explain a little bit how the federal infrastructure plays into this whole plan?
Yeah, I'll start, and then if Hank and Jimmy want to add. Federal infrastructure, look, we are really hopeful about the infrastructure plan. Some of that money flows more directly, some through competitions. Whatever example it is, we know New York City is going to benefit a lot. And that's just going to relieve some of the pressure on us in terms of budget and help us do more. Too early to say what impact it might have on this specific project, but absolutely will be very, very helpful overall. We're excited about it. In terms of the sensors and the ability to address the oversized trucks, Hank will confirm this. I believe the legislation has not yet been signed in Albany, so I'll make a simple statement. Whoever is governor will need to sign this legislation expeditiously so we can get these sensors in place for next year. And that's going to really help us address these oversized trucks. It's imperative that we get it signed quickly. Yet another reason why we need a functioning government in Albany and a governor who's focused on serving people, not trying to save their own skin. Go ahead, Kevin.
My second question is a bit more broad. I think one of my colleagues already kind of asked you about this, but a lot of people have been calling for a more, dramatic transformation of the BQE. Some have called to tear it down entirely or turn it into some sort of park. Do you think they might be disappointed that this plan basically kicks the future of it down the road almost 20 years, possibly?
Well, I can't speak to what other people feel, but I could tell you, look, right now the notion that you're going to turn it into a park overnight, obviously that wasn't going to happen. We need to address the immediate needs of people trying to get around and how things are moved around the city while transforming away from our current paradigm. I think where I'd find a lot of common ground with folks who'd like to see it torn down is we need to get rid of trucks to the maximum extent possible. We can't get it done totally, obviously, but we need to reduce truck traffic in this city by getting on the water, getting on the rails, going to where there are trucks, smaller trucks, as Hank described and Jimmy described. We need to transform the reality. That's going to take years by definition. But in the meantime, to have the BQE function better, to reduce the volume on it, make it work better, and force against the big trucks makes a lot of sense. For those who want a transformative vision, such as ultimately a world in which it may not be necessary, I think that's a very, very productive conversation. But to do that, let's go at the root causes. Let's find new ways to move things around, greener ways to move things around, so we can get to the day where we're having an honest conversation about whether we need some of the highways we have today.
We have time for two more for today. The next is Paul Leota from the Staten Island Advance.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for taking my question. This is for you and the DOT officials on the call. I was just hoping to get an update on the status of the Alice class ferries, when Staten Islanders and New Yorkers more broadly should expect them.
I'm going to turn to Hank. I think the answer is soon. Tell me, Hank.
Soon. We were having exactly that conversation yesterday, and we are trying to plan for that. We plan for this soon, certainly before the end of the year, and we're hoping sometime this fall. I'd be happy to get you more details later today if you'd like, but we are working on getting it done as soon as we can.
Amen. Go ahead,
for obvious
Paul.
reasons.
Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you for that. And just secondly, I know you talked about this a bit on Morning Joe, but I was hoping to get some of the health professionals' perspective. With cases rising and the deadline for students to be fully vaccinated by the time school starts, is there any plan in the city for more remote options for kids who aren't vaccinated?
No, the plan is have all our kids back. I'll turn to Dr. Choksi, who is passionate on this topic and is a parent, and really we've had this conversation now for months about how you balance all the needs of children, including all the many healthcare, physical and mental health care needs of kids. And it keeps coming back to the same answer: get kids back into school, but do it safely. We're going to keep vaccinating young people right up to the beginning of school, even after the beginning of school. Whenever we can get someone to get vaccinated, it's going to help. But remember, even without vaccination, the incredible success we had keeping schools safe. Pre-vaccination, how much we were able to address this challenge, and we're going to do it again. Dr. Choksi.
Thank you, sir. And I am indeed passionate about the idea that we have to bring our kids back to school in person, not just for their educational development, their social development, but also for their health, both their physical and mental health. This is so important for the short term as well as for the long term for future generations of New Yorkers. That focus on health is completely consistent with our focus on safety in schools as well. And we have talked about our layered approach to COVID-19 prevention, masking, distancing, ventilation, testing. Those are all key components of how we will keep kids safe. But as the mayor has said, the most important one is vaccination, making sure that school staff are vaccinated as much as possible. For those who are 12 and up, ensuring that they get vaccinated before school. And I do want to urge and encourage all parents to make an appointment today, if you haven't already, so that your child can be fully vaccinated by the time that school starts.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Last question for today goes to Julianne from Streets Blog.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Julianne, how you doing?
Hi, how are you? So I've also been asking about the BQE plans for a while. I think most of the criticisms and questions have already been aired and asked, but again, I mean, this just seems to be lacking in boldness and kicking the can down the road. So why not, at least put forth the plan that like the comptroller came up with which was at least making the BQE truck only, to keep trucks off local roads and at least divert car traffic elsewhere?
Well, I appreciate the question. I'll start. And look, it's America. You can use any phrase you want. People can say kicking the can down the road. I just disagree. We have a structure. We thought it was in danger of literally imminent collapse. It turns out there's a way to preserve it. That really kind of was job one, to keep this thing going while we figured out what the future looks like in general, way beyond the BQE. And where I think we all would find a lot of common ground is the future should mean less and less car ownership, more and more mass transit, less and less use of big trucks, more and more use of rail and waterborne freight, more small solutions. I think this plan opens the door to getting all those bigger things right. So I think it's quite present. I don't think it's trying to delay the march of history. I think it's trying to forward the march of history. What we need to do for sure is fill in the blanks in these next months, and we intend to, on how we're going to do more waterborne freight, how we're going to do more rail, how we're going to do more smaller trucks, how we're going to make all this come alive. So that's my preface. Hank and Jimmy, you want to add?
Yeah, I think it was, a consensus up and down the corridor from all the affected communities, who often don't agree on much, that they didn't want any of these proposals that were being imposed, including the controller's proposal to change it into a truck-only highway, which does run a little bit inconsistent with our notion that we can become less dependent on those big trucks. What they wanted was the opportunity to have input into that future, to say for themselves what their communities needed. And that process takes time. So you may describe it as kicking it down the road. I would describe it as keeping the highway operational and safe long enough for that process, which we're beginning now, to run its course, to produce a good consensus plan if that's possible, to get the political buy-in from the various governments that would have to agree in order to execute it, and then to get it done, going through all the planning, all the funding, all of the regulatory stuff that's involved in any project of this nature. That takes time. The time we're buying is that time. And in the meantime, the world is changing. And as the mayor said, we are optimistic that it will be less truck dependent going forward. So that's the answer to the question. The only thing I would add is, having spent 20 years working on building Brooklyn Bridge Park, I've seen this movie. And the way it happened was because there ended up being a broad community outreach that produced something approaching a consensus plan. And it was only at that point that the state and the city got together and pledged to build the park. I envision something similar happening here if we're that fortunate. That's what we're trying to facilitate.
But faster. Jimmy.
But faster. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Jimmy, would you like to add?
My final thoughts are that the planning process is not going to take 10 or 20 years. Right. The planning process is going to take, a couple of years, and the remaining time is, as Hank said, whatever community-based vision is developed needs to go through all of the approvals, the funding and financing and implementation, and this 20-year fix buys us that time. So I think we're doing the absolute prudent thing, the right thing, and I'm really proud of this effort.
Thank you. Go ahead, Julianne.
Hi, thanks. So I guess if you were saying that, job one was shoring up the roadway, it sounds like finding alternative modes of freight and movement and deliveries was in silos with that. Why was that not why are you waiting for the last year to come up with alternative freight now? And also, like, was there no community process before this? I mean, wasn't that the whole point of what was going on with the BQE panel and everything? Like, wasn't that all done?
No. I mean, simply, Hank can separately, I mean, in a second, I'll give you the quick version, please, Hank.
Yes.
There was a process that certainly didn't yield a full solution, which is not surprising for the reasons that Hank just said. The work that we're doing on things like rail freight has been going on for years at Economic Development Corporation. We're talking about things that are going to have to structurally change a lot of what New York City does. They're not going to happen overnight. So look, I appreciate the optimism or the sort of idealism of saying, can we radically, immediately shift to a new approach? I find that very attractive. I think the truth is that the work it's going to take to undo the American reality, which is heavy on cars, heavy on trucks, and actually reorient to the water, reorient to rail, reorient to smaller, greener approaches, that's going to take years. The good news is it can be done. We've seen it. A good example, Hank referenced NYC Ferry. It's one piece of the transportation puzzle. There's a lot more to do, but it certainly was done in a small time period. A system was created. A lot of people are using it. Tremendous potential for growth. And I think when you think about the freight side of the equation, we're now walking down that road, and we've started to do some of the pieces we need to do on the rail piece in particular. More is going to be talked about that in the next weeks. But I think something of this magnitude, that's why I say let's go to root causes. We have to figure out the profound solutions to get people away from cars and trucks so we can do the really big things. And I think this approach is what's going to help us get there. In terms of just simply affirming that there was a process, but it was far from conclusive. Go ahead, Hank.
Indeed, the conclusion of the community outreach process that the expert panel did was that the community wanted us to launch a broader community-wide consensus-building vision process, which is exactly what we're doing. They didn't have a consensus behind any particular plan. They had a consensus that they wanted to participate in creating a plan. And that's exactly what we're setting out to do starting this month or next.
Thank you. And everyone, as we conclude, look, it is a really good sign that we can talk about fixing the infrastructure of the city and moving forward. We're able to have that discussion because we've made as much progress as we have had against COVID. We've made progress because of vaccinations. The city's coming back. We've got to double down on that progress with more and more and more vaccinations so we can keep doing the work of the recovery. And here's where the story gets good. At the exact moment in history where we have a president and a Congress that actually want to focus on infrastructure and help us move to a whole different place. We haven't had that for years and years. It's finally here. In this sense, a good time to be alive, and one that we need to take full advantage of in this city as we move forward. Thank you, everyone.